You stand ankle-deep in cold water as the first light of dawn stretches across a quiet shoreline. The air smells of wet reeds and salt. Tiny ripples shimmer in the orange glow while distant birds cry overhead. Around you, dozens of silver fish flash beneath the surface, so close that they almost seem within reach. Yet every attempt to catch them ends the same way. The moment your hands touch the water, they vanish into the darkness below. Hunger waits behind you. Opportunity swims in front of you. Somewhere between the two, a simple idea has not yet been born. Perhaps one of the greatest inventions in human history was never made from bronze, iron, or stone. It may have begun with flexible plant fibers, patient observation, and a realization that one pair of hands could never compete with an entire school of fish. Archaeological evidence suggests that fishing nets may have transformed food gathering in ways we rarely stop to imagine. For much of early human history, catching fish was an unpredictable gamble. Spears could strike only what hunters could see. Hands were too slow. Baskets worked only in narrow streams. Even hooks, which appeared surprisingly early in some regions, relied on individual fish taking the bait one at a time. The rivers, lakes, and coastlines of the world contained astonishing amounts of food, yet much of it remained frustratingly out of reach. This seems almost strange when viewed from the modern world. Fish are among the richest renewable food sources available to humans. They reproduce quickly, migrate in enormous numbers, and often gather together in dense schools. Standing beside a river filled with thousands of fish while still going hungry sounds almost impossible today. But for prehistoric communities, abundance alone solved nothing. Nature offered opportunity, yet opportunity demanded a completely new way of thinking. Instead of asking how to catch a single fish, someone may have begun asking a very different question. What if the fish could catch themselves? That question sounds simple now, but it required a remarkable shift in perspective. It meant stopping the endless chase and beginning to shape the environment instead. Rather than becoming faster than the fish, humans could become smarter than their movement. Instead of targeting one animal, they could intercept an entire group at once. The idea probably did not appear overnight. Innovation in prehistory almost never worked that way. Across thousands of years, small observations accumulated. Branches washed together after floods sometimes trapped fish against the shore. Floating reeds occasionally formed natural barriers where fish struggled to escape. Tangled roots beneath riverbanks created pockets where fish gathered before finding an opening. Nature itself may have been quietly demonstrating the principles of a net long before humans understood what they were seeing. Early people were extraordinary observers. Their survival depended on noticing details that most modern eyes would completely ignore. They recognized seasonal winds, animal migration routes, edible plants hidden among poisonous ones, and tiny changes in weather. It is entirely possible that they also noticed how flexible vines could entangle fish attempting to swim through narrow gaps. Imagine watching a frightened fish panic inside a cluster of submerged roots. The more it struggled, the more tightly it became trapped. That moment alone could have sparked an entirely new idea. The obstacle was no longer the enemy. It had become the tool. Yet noticing a pattern in nature was only the beginning. Turning that observation into something humans could build required solving a challenge that had nothing to do with fish at all. It required mastering one of humanity's oldest technologies, making strong cord. Long before woven fishing nets appeared, people had already learned to twist plant fibers, strips of bark, grasses, animal sinew, and other natural materials into surprisingly durable strings. Archaeological discoveries from several prehistoric sites suggest that cordage technology existed tens of thousands of years ago, although the organic fibers themselves rarely survive because they decay over time. Occasionally, however, ancient impressions preserved in clay or microscopic wear patterns on stone tools reveal that fiber working was already an established skill. This quiet technological revolution rarely receives the attention given to stone axes or spear points. Yet without reliable cord, there could be no nets, no woven baskets, no carrying slings, no snares, and eventually no sails capable of crossing open water. String may have been one of the most important inventions our ancestors ever created. The challenge was that making cord demanded remarkable patience. Individual fibers snapped easily. They had to be separated, soaked, twisted together, and continually tightened. A single length of strong cord might require hundreds of careful movements. Constructing enough cord to create even a small fishing net would have taken days, perhaps even weeks. Why invest such enormous effort? Because the reward could feed an entire family instead of just one person. This changes the story from simple invention into economic logic. A spear might catch one fish if the hunter was skilled and fortunate. A woven net, once completed, could continue working again and again. It transformed many hours of labor into a reusable tool capable of multiplying future success. Some researchers believe this represents one of the earliest examples of humans investing significant time in creating technology that produced delayed rewards. Rather than searching constantly for today's meal, communities were beginning to build tools that increased tomorrow's harvest. And once people understood that possibility, the question was no longer whether a net could work. The real mystery became how prehistoric humans learned to weave hundreds of cords into a structure strong enough to survive moving water without falling apart. But recognizing that strong cord could be made was only half the solution. A bundle of rope could pull, tie, or carry, but it could not stop hundreds of fish moving in every direction at once. Somewhere along the way, prehistoric craftspeople discovered that strength alone was not enough. What mattered was the empty space between the cords. That realization may have come from weaving rather than fishing. Long before permanent villages appeared, humans were already interlacing fibers to create baskets, mats, sleeping surfaces, and containers. Archaeological evidence from several regions suggests that weaving technologies are extremely ancient, even if the fibers themselves rarely survive. Occasionally, fragments of woven material, impressions left in clay, or microscopic traces preserved on tools reveal that complex weaving skills existed long before written history. The leap from weaving a basket to weaving a net may sound obvious today, but the two solve very different problems. A basket is designed to hold weight. A net is designed to allow movement while still creating a barrier. Instead of creating a solid wall, prehistoric innovators needed to build hundreds of carefully measured openings that were just large enough for water to pass through, but just small enough to prevent fish from escaping. That balance was probably discovered through countless failures. Perhaps the first attempts were woven too tightly. Water resistance would have made them heavy and difficult to pull. Others may have been too loose, allowing fish to swim straight through. Some nets likely tore apart after only a few uses because the knots slipped under tension. Every mistake became another lesson hidden inside the next design. This slow process of improvement is something archaeology often struggles to preserve because plant fibers decay rapidly in most environments. Yet rare discoveries provide remarkable glimpses into this forgotten technology. One of the oldest known examples of preserved fishing net fragments comes from Antria in present-day Finland, where a remarkable section of net, made primarily from willow bast fibers, has been dated to around 8,000 years ago. Although this discovery represents a relatively late stage in human history compared with the origins of fishing itself, it demonstrates that prehistoric people had already mastered sophisticated knotting and weaving techniques capable of producing large, durable nets. Elsewhere, archaeologists have uncovered stone net weights from much older coastal and riverside sites. These carefully shaped stones often contain grooves or notches where cords could be secured. Their presence strongly suggests that some form of fishing net was already in use, even when the organic fibers have completely disappeared. In many cases, the stones survive while the nets themselves return to the soil, leaving only indirect evidence behind. Bone needles found at prehistoric settlements may also tell part of the story. While many were almost certainly used for sewing clothing made from animal hides, some researchers believe similar tools could also have been used to repair damaged nets or weave new sections. A torn net represented a significant investment of labor, making repair almost as important as construction. The more archaeologists study ancient fishing communities, the more they discover that net making was probably not an isolated skill belonging to a single talented individual. It may have involved entire families. Imagine a quiet evening beside a river after the day's hunting had ended. Children twist fresh plant fibers into thin cords, while older adults inspect knots worn from repeated use. Experienced hands weave new sections almost automatically after decades of practice. Stories pass from one generation to the next as the net slowly grows across many evenings. In that moment, technology is no longer simply an object. It has become culture. Different environments also encourage different solutions. Communities living beside calm lakes may have preferred wide, lightweight nets that could be spread across shallow water. Coastal groups facing waves and tides likely required stronger fibers and reinforced edges. Rivers with powerful currents demanded designs capable of resisting constant pressure without twisting apart. Nature itself became the engineer, forcing people to adapt every detail. Perhaps the most remarkable feature of prehistoric fishing nets was not their complexity, but their flexibility. Unlike a spear designed for one purpose, a net could be modified, expanded, repaired, shortened, or combined with other nets. It evolved alongside the people who depended on it. And as these woven barriers became larger and more reliable, they did something no hunting weapon had ever truly accomplished before. They allowed entire communities to harvest nature together rather than one person at a time. That simple change would eventually reshape not only how people caught fish, but how they organized their lives. Then something unexpected happened. As fishing nets became larger and more effective, they stopped being merely tools for catching food. They began changing the way entire communities lived. A successful hunt with a spear often depended on the strength and skill of one individual. A large fishing net, however, demanded something very different. It required cooperation. Imagine standing along the edge of a broad river thousands of years ago. The morning mist still clings to the water as several people quietly spread out along the shoreline. Some hold the edges of the net. Others wade carefully into the shallows. A few wait farther downstream, ready to guide frightened fish toward the woven barrier. No single person controls the entire operation. Every movement depends on everyone else. This may have been one of humanity's earliest examples of large-scale teamwork centered around a renewable food source. Unlike hunting large mammals, where success could be uncertain for days or even weeks, fish returned season after season. Salmon fought their way upstream every year. Coastal fish gathered during spawning periods. Rivers overflowed with life during seasonal migrations. Once people understood these rhythms, they were no longer simply reacting to nature. They were learning to predict it. Archaeological evidence from many parts of the world suggests that prehistoric communities often settled near productive rivers, lakes, estuaries, and coastlines. Access to reliable aquatic resources may have encouraged groups to remain in one place for longer periods instead of constantly following migrating game. While mobility remained an important part of many ancient lifestyles, dependable fishing created new possibilities for seasonal camps and, eventually, more permanent settlements in certain regions. This shift was subtle but profound. When food became more predictable, daily life slowly began to change. Parents could spend more time caring for children instead of searching endlessly for the next meal. Older members of the community, who might no longer have been capable of chasing large animals, could still contribute by repairing nets, preparing fibers, or passing down techniques that had taken decades to master. Knowledge itself became one of the community's most valuable resources. Some researchers suggest that this transfer of practical knowledge across generations played an important role in the development of increasingly complex societies. A fishing net was not simply an object that could be copied at a glance. It required learning the right fibers, the correct knots, the proper mesh size, and the best seasons to use it. Each generation inherited not only the net itself, but the experience behind it. The technology also encouraged planning on an entirely new scale. Building a net demanded patience because the reward would not come immediately. Gathering fibers, twisting cord, weaving hundreds of knots, repairing damaged sections, and organizing people to use it all required time before a single fish was caught. This may have strengthened an ability that became increasingly important throughout human history: investing effort today for benefits tomorrow. That kind of thinking appears again and again in archaeology. It can be seen in the construction of storage pits, the cultivation of crops thousands of years later, and eventually the building of villages and cities. In many ways, a fishing net represents more than a woven tool. It reflects a growing willingness to shape the future instead of simply responding to the present. There was another advantage that made nets especially powerful. They captured abundance. A spear might provide one fish, a hook might catch another. But during the right season, a well-made net could gather dozens, sometimes even hundreds, of fish in a single effort, depending on local conditions and the size of the net. Such harvests were never guaranteed, but when they happened, they created opportunities that hunting alone rarely offered. Of course, catching more fish also created a new problem. Fresh fish spoil quickly. Without a way to preserve large catches, much of this valuable food could be lost within days, especially in warmer climates. Success suddenly presented a challenge that previous generations had rarely faced. Instead of asking how to catch fish, people now had to ask another question. How could they make today's catch feed them weeks or even months later? The answer to that question would lead prehistoric communities toward another remarkable innovation, one that transformed fishing from a daily activity into the foundation of long-term survival. However, solving the problem of preservation did more than prevent food from spoiling. It changed the relationship between humans and time itself. For countless generations, survival had been measured one day at a time. A successful hunt meant eating today. A failed hunt meant uncertainty tomorrow. Fishing nets, combined with techniques for preserving fish, may have been among the first technologies to loosen that relentless cycle. Once communities learned to dry fish under the sun, smoke them over controlled fires, or preserve them in cold, seasonal conditions where climate allowed, periods of abundance could extend far beyond the day of the catch. Archaeological evidence from numerous prehistoric coastal and riverine sites suggests that fish processing became an increasingly important part of daily life in many regions. The exact methods differed across environments, but the principle remained remarkably similar: catch more than you need today so you can survive tomorrow. This simple idea carried enormous consequences. Reliable food stores reduced the risk of seasonal shortages. Families no longer needed every adult to spend every waking hour searching for food. Some people could devote more time to making better tools. Others improved shelters, crafted clothing, cared for children, or shared knowledge accumulated over decades. Gradually, survival became less about constant emergency and more about preparation. Fishing nets played a quiet but essential role in that transformation. Unlike many hunting weapons, a net could continue producing food year after year with careful maintenance. Knots could be repaired, damaged sections replaced, additional panels woven to increase its size. A well-made net became an investment that grew more valuable over time rather than wearing out after a few successful hunts. This long-term perspective may also have influenced social organization. Nets were often too large and too labor-intensive to belong to a single individual alone. They may have been shared among extended families or entire communities, encouraging cooperation not only during fishing but also in construction, repair, and ownership. Although archaeologists continue to debate exactly how these early societies organized such resources, evidence from many traditional fishing cultures suggests that communal labor often became just as important as the technology itself. There is another fascinating detail that is easy to overlook. Fishing nets did not remain confined to rivers. As humans gradually expanded along coastlines, the same principles that worked in freshwater environments began opening opportunities in estuaries, lagoons, and eventually the open sea. Coastal archaeology reveals increasing reliance on marine resources in many parts of the world, including southern Africa, Southeast Asia, Australia, Japan, and the Mediterranean. In each region, local environments inspired different designs, materials, and techniques, yet the underlying concept remained strikingly familiar: create a flexible barrier that works with the movement of water rather than against it. This may explain why fishing technology appears in so many different cultures, separated by thousands of kilometers. Rather than spreading from one single inventor, similar solutions could have emerged independently wherever humans carefully observed fish behavior, mastered fiber technology, and recognized patterns in nature. The idea of the net may have been rediscovered many times because the problem and the environment were remarkably similar. By now, something extraordinary had happened. What began as twisted plant fibers had become an invisible thread connecting technology, cooperation, ecology, and survival. A fishing net was no longer just a collection of knots. It represented accumulated knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Every repaired section carried experience. Every carefully measured mesh reflected observation. Every successful catch rewarded patience rather than luck. Return once more to that quiet shoreline at sunrise. The same silver fish still flash beneath the water. The same birds circle overhead. The smell of wet reeds still fills the morning air. But this time, no one reaches into the river with empty hands. Instead, several people quietly lift a woven net that disappears beneath the surface before rising again, shimmering with dozens of fish trapped inside. The invention looks almost ordinary. There are no sharp blades, no polished metals, no monumental structures, only plant fibers tied together with hundreds of careful knots. Yet those simple knots may have changed human history more than they appear to. Because the true invention was never the net itself. It was the realization that understanding nature could be more powerful than trying to overpower it. And perhaps that has always been humanity's greatest